this morning with my jet lag. It's like the middle of the night for me. I was like, oh. And then I come here.
Yeah,
Stunning.
it's very
Magnificent Hallel. I said, oh,
such talent.
that was worth it. Beautiful. So much. I don't know if you noticed, but as they were playing and singing so beautifully, and you chose the tunes so artistically, you noticed the ups and downs. Here we are singing Hallel, and some of the songs are upbeat and seem to belong to a celebration. But then all of a sudden the tune changes and we get a little bit more somber as we daven intensely for Yeshua. How is it that we weave together those feelings? And that's really what I want to talk about, because this is one of the most significant messages of Rosh Chodesh. So we daven Hallel, and the next part of our davening is going to be Musaf. Musaf is that Tosefet, that's the shorash of the word Musaf, lehosif, to add. This is an additional Shmoneh Esrei that we add on specific Yamim Tovim, Shabbat, and Rosh Chodesh. This is instead of Korban Musaf, which was an extra sacrifice that we brought when we had Beit HaMikdash. Interestingly, in the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, we daven specifically for redemption from enemies. Utshuat nafsham miyad oyev. We're going to say it, so we're going to notice that. We also mention oivim, our enemies, and our prayer to be saved from the enemies in another unique prayer that is said regarding Rosh Chodesh, not on Rosh Chodesh itself, which we women do not say. And I want to refer to that prayer that we might not be familiar with because we don't say it according to our custom. But let me start with a story. Franz Joseph was one of the known emperors in Europe. He was the emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire when those two countries were joined together. And he was known to be quite tolerant and quite enlightened. And that, of course, translated to his approach to the Jews and his policy towards the Jews who were his subjects. So, as the story goes, he was sending his people to different parts of his vast empire to see what they're doing. So, on one such occasion, he sent an emissary to a Jewish community, and that individual came to the community on a Saturday night. And what he sees is a group of Yidden standing outside of their synagogue, dancing in their best attire. And he was like kind of wondering what is going on. Why are they outside of the sanctuary and not inside? Now, of course, what he was watching was which ritual? Kiddush Levana, which we women, according to custom, do not participate in. So he walked over, he was supposed to give a report to his emperor, and he asked the Jews, what exactly are you doing? Why are you outside? Why are you dancing? Why are you dressed up for the occasion? What is going on? Now, you be there with the congregants and try to make sense of this ritual to a non-Jew. What would you say? What are we doing? Why are we dancing? Do you know the words of the dance? I must say, those words became very popular. They died out like all those popular songs that are not really songs, but you know, they have a hit and that's it. Do you remember that song? I don't remember who was the singer who put the tune to the words. Kashem she'ani roked kenegdech. Just like I am dancing in front of you, facing you, ve'ine yachol ligoa bach, but I cannot touch you. So too, lo yuchlu oivai lagat bi. My enemies would not be able to touch me. So again, in this ritual of Kiddush Levana, one of the phrases in the liturgy is, just like I dance in front of you, facing you, and who is the you? The Levana, the moon. Just like I'm dancing to you and I can't touch you, so too my enemies would not be able to touch me. Now you realize that in that liturgical few lines, there is no reference to the moon. But if you speak Hebrew, it's Kashem she'ani roked kenegdech. That is zachar, that's right, masculine. Ve'ini yachol lagat bach, that's female. And you can imagine why that has become popular amongst the youth. Not knowing what they're singing about. It's like, ooh, cool, romantic, beautiful. Okay. What is going on? We're dancing, we're singing, the moon, what is going on? So, they try, those congregants, they try to somehow explain that puzzling ritual to a non-Jew, and here is what they tell him. What is going on? What are we doing in Kiddush Lehana? We are praying to God to fill the void of the moon. The moon is not at its best. This is close to Rosh Chodesh, right? We say that probably this coming Motzei Shabbat is when if the weather is not an English weather, this is when they are going to try to say. So what do we say? Oh, Nebuch on the poor Levana. Look at the Levana. So tiny. Barely seen. We ask God to fill it up to its fullest illuminating power. Now, what do you think the Caesar, upon hearing this report, thought to himself? So according to the story, this was his reaction. Oh, that's interesting. The Jews have nothing more to pray for. Just that the shape of the moon is going to be complete and not a sliver. Apparently, they are doing very well. They have no other concerns but to pray for the moon to be in its full glory. So this is the Caesar's understanding. But how do we understand it? So for this we have to go back to Bereshit, to the very beginning. And we know the account of Hashem creating the luminaries on Wednesday. And they were created, Ameorot Agdolim, the large luminaries. And then as we follow on with the verses describing the creation of that day, all of a sudden we are introduced to Amaor Agadol and Amaor Akatan. We started with two large luminaries, and before we know it, we're moving on to the large and the small. What happened? So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Midrash, with the rabbis' homiletical explanation of this change from the two large luminaries to one large and one small. And the rabbis tell us this interesting conversation that the moon has with God, the Creator. The moon comes with a complaint. This is not right. We cannot have two kings ruling with one crown. This is trouble. This is chaos. There is only one authority that has to be on top if you want the country to run properly. Now, even in a democracy like the US, I don't know if you can call it that, but used to be, you have one president. You have a Congress, you have a Senate, everything is fine. But at the end of the day, you must have one ruler who can put his foot down in case of an emergency, because otherwise you get chaos. No decision is going to pass. So the moon comes with what seems to be a legitimate argument. You created two luminaries. We are supposed to control the universe. Now, as I went on in my studies of science, I realized how what we read in Sefer Bereshit is so much better understood with all that we know today about science. The moon does control the world. If we know a little bit the basic science, this is the source of energy. Without the sun, there is no living organism. This is what starts and continues the flow of energy in the universe. So the moon says you can't have two. If you want an organized, orderly kingdom, you can only have one king. To which God responds, oh yeah, that's a good argument, you're right. And therefore, you, the moon, go reduce yourself. The sun is going to be in control. The sun is going to wear that one crown, but the moon, you're going to be subservient to the sun. Now, the reality as we know it, since we have this shift from two large luminaries that are equal into the large and the vice president, which is the moon, is that the sun is the source of light. The moon does not have any source of light as in of itself. The only thing that it can do is reflect the light of the sun. But even that is not consistent. As we know, the cycle of the 29 and a half days in which the moon orbits around the sun, and mid-month it's in its fullest, and then it wanes, and then it starts waxing again. This is what the moon symbolizes to us. These vicissitudes. It's not constant like the sun. It has its good days, and it has its very low days. It has the upbeat music, mid-month, and then it has the sad Ana Shemoshiana. So how do we understand it? So let's start with the science. When is it that the moon becomes a sliver and then completely disappears? What's the cause for that? Since the moon does not have its own source of energy and illumination, what happens that all of a sudden it becomes a sliver? The sun is always there. So why can't the moon reflect that sun fully throughout the months? Because something comes in between. There is another object that orbits the sun, and that is Earth. And when Earth comes in between the sun and the moon cannot be luminous as it is when there is no wedge between itself and the source of light. And that's when we start understanding the allegory that these luminaries serve in the relationship between the Jewish people and God. The Jewish people, the rabbis tell us, are compared to the moon. In what way? If we are the moon, who is the sun? Who is the sun?
Hashem.
And what is our role as the Jewish people? We do not have our independent, innate source of light. We don't generate our own light. What is our role? To be in the best orientation vis-a-vis the sun, Hashem, the source of light, and reflect that light to the rest of the world. But for that to happen fully, there can never be a wedge, there can never be a barrier between Hashem and the Jewish people. When we are in the best angle, when we are fully connected, when there is no divide between us and Hashem, that's where we shine fully. But when there are some other things that separate us, that's when we start waning and the light sometimes completely disappears. But here is the beauty of Israel that is compared to the moon. The beauty is that even when the moon disappears, we know it's going to wax again. It's going eventually to get to this luminous point of Tetvav, of mid-month. And this is what's so unique about the Jewish people. There is no other people that traces its history with such accuracy, names, details. We're not talking myth when we talk about what happened to our nation 2,000 years ago. We're talking facts. We go back 3,000 years ago. with facts. There is no other nations that has such accurate history of such a long period of time, simply because no one else survived. The nations of the world rise, civilizations rise and fall. They reach a peak, and then they decline and disappear from the stage of history. This is what happened to Egypt. Egypt of today has nothing to do with the glory of Egypt, of the pharaohs. This is what happened to Greece. This is what happened to Rome. And yes, you can find artifacts in the British Museum. That's very nice. But you don't have living people who can stand and say, I can show you my genealogy. I trace myself all the way back to Titus, who destroyed Beit HaMikdash. There is no such living person. They disappear. And the Jewish people, against all odds, fighting more enemies than any other nations throughout their history, are still here. We wax and wane. We are here to reflect the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we are connected, and there is nothing that stands between us and Hashem, we are radiating light fully. But then we suffer our downfalls. And those enemies who are the sticks in the hands of God to remind us that we need to reorient ourselves, that we need to remove those barriers and those wedges between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those enemies think that finally they were able to vanquish the Jewish people. There's never going to be light coming from moon again. And sometimes they're even able to plant doubt in us. Is that the end? Are we going to shine again? But then, as we reach the lowest point, we start waxing. You know, I often reflect on that when I sit with a family, multi-generational family, at an event in which I am the outside guest. And I see grandparents, children, grandchildren assembled together, singing the same ancient words. And I think to myself, I know the story. The great-grandparents were Holocaust survivors. Who could have ever believed that 80 years later we will have what we see today in our Jewish beautiful communities? I mean, if you would have asked one of those SS guards as he was doing that which was unimaginable, you know, when people tell me, how can people deny the Holocaust? You know what my answer is? How can people believe the Holocaust? What do you mean? Who could have believed that human beings would just push other human beings into gas chambers and eliminate them? You know, people say, oh, the Hungarian Jews, when the refugees from Poland came and told them the story, they didn't believe. I said, I wouldn't believe it either. Who would have ever believed such a thing? But what's even more unbelievable is that after such a genocide, we're singing Hallel, the same Hallel that have been sung since we left Mitzrayim. And you know, as you were using your top, I said to myself, oh, yeah, soon, very soon, we did that. We're going to keep on doing it. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. This is the Jewish people that is compared to the moon. And now we can understand why on Rosh Chodesh, specifically, when we say Musaf, the additional prayer of Rosh Chodesh, we mention the enemies. We mention the enemies when we say Kiddush Levana, and we mention the enemies when we daven Musaf of Rosh Chodesh. Because this is one of our messages of Rosh Chodesh. Yes, we suffer through very, very low points. You know, the rabbis tell us when the Jewish people falls, its falling is lower than any other nation. There's no other nations that went through a Holocaust. But don't give up. That's the moon. It disappears completely. And you think the story's over. You know, one of the phrases that you have on a coin, a Roman coin, that was coined after the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, is Judea capta. End of story, done. No more Judea. Go to Israel. Suffering from enemies surrounding it, and if you're just going to try to imagine the odds of the survival of a state that has 9 million Jews and facing billions of enemies surrounding, I mean, what? Still around. And I often think about it when I see the pictures that, you know, the media loves to show. The poor Palestinians. That's just a little bit of history. The poor Palestinians and the occupying Israelis were given the choice to build a country at the same time. This is 1947, Kaftet November, the 29th of November, which is the UN vote. The UN vote was not about establishing a state for the Jews. It was the two-state solution. We are now 80 years later. The Jews have a first world country. The Palestinians still claim to live in refugee camps. The starting point was at the same time. This is the Muna. This is Am Israel. And I think it's very much was captured by your choice of tunes. Yes, sometimes we're upbeat, but then we scream, Ana Hashem Moshiach. We reach the very low point. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're coming back to you. We're going to remove all those barriers that don't allow us to illuminate the light that you are shining through us to the rest of the world. And therefore, this is a good time to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save us from our enemies. We have to do our part. And you know, in the Musar movement, that movement that developed in the 19th century in Lithuania, the founder, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, one of their phrases when it came to this time of year, this is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, they started getting ready. They started getting ready to Rosh Hashanah. And they read the name of the Chodesh, Tammuz, the acronym of Zmanei, that's the Zion, Tshuva, that's the Taf, Memashmeshim, Uva'im, times of Tshuva are coming. And as we know, that translation of the word Tshuva is return, coming back. We start thinking about coming back to the best position vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that when we get to Chodesh Av and we move even closer to that potent time of Tshuva, Av they read as Elul, Ba, and then we get to Elul, and then we get to Tishrei, and then we finally can be at our best and shine our light to the rest of the world. We have been through a very rough year. We have been through a year where our enemies again threatened to eliminate us. And unfortunately, we lost so many young lives in this battle. But we want to start waxing again. We want to do our part as Rosh Chodesh Tammuz comes and tells us that though right now we can't see the moon, we're going to do our best to come back, to be with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that we will be saved from our enemies and be able to shine again. So this is the message of Rosh Chodesh. And if I have a few more minutes, I will just add, what is the unique role of women when it comes to Rosh Chodesh? Because we know that Rosh Chodesh is a special Yom Tov for women. So what is our part in Rosh Chodesh? So when we're talking about these ups and downs, who like us knows what that means? This cycle which starts biologically but translates to our moods and our emotions, right? And we go through times when we are with it, upbeat, shining, full, into times where we feel like no energy at all. And that's why for women there is a special link to Rosh Chodesh that represents that as human beings we go through ups and downs. So long as we remember when we hit rock bottom that we're going to shine again. And this is the special gift that women give to the Jewish people. That ability not to wallow and stay in the down, but pick ourselves up and know that we can shine again. Women, we know, never lost hope of reaching Eretz Israel. When we read Parashat Shlach, now this past Shabbos, but another one before, we know that the women chibevu et haaretz. And if the women were the spies, we would not have any negative reports, right? Because Bnot Tzlofchad were the symbol of, no, we want the land. When everyone else was saying, oh, that's too hard, we can do that. Look at what's so unique about women. Women have the power to bring new life. Rechem, the womb of a woman, which is the promise of renewal, of regeneration. If you read it and you jumble the words, you get the word machal. This is what's so unique about women. We have the vision of tomorrow. We don't give up so easily just because today it is very difficult. This ability to carry a baby for 9 months, this is like, when I think about Amazon Prime, and they are now up to like the drones that are going to drop you whatever you ordered within an hour. And unfortunately, that translates into what we feel as we look at the younger generation, the inability to wait for anything, the patience to know there is a process and things develop and evolve, and you can just press a button and accept results right away. And I often think about it, okay, so we shortened all processes. Are we going to come up with a way to shorten the 9 months of pregnancy? So we women are still going to maintain that concept that if you want to have a new born, there's going to be a process of 9 months of waiting. That's our ability to see the machal, to see the morrow, even when there is nothing there externally that indicates that promise of new birth. And with this power of machal, we women throughout the history were strong, resilient, even when the men gave up. And that goes back to Mitzrayim, when remember that conversation between Miriam and her father Amram. He was the Gadol, and he intellectually understood this is the end. We're not bringing more babies to the wall to throw them into the Nile. And the women held on, and they fought, and they brought another generation and another generation. We all read those moving stories of women throughout the very difficult chapters of our history who keep going, even when the men give up. So with this power of Rosh Chodesh, of renewal, of the ability to regenerate new life, even when it's so dark, and everyone says this is it, no light is going to shine through the moon anymore, we are able to say there is a machal, there is a morrow. We'll keep going because we know the sun has not disappeared. It's just we will have to reorient ourselves. So I hope we're going to take those messages of Rosh Chodesh, and very soon we'll reach the point that Inavi is talking about. We are no longer, the moon is going to go through waxing and waning, but it's going to shine fully forever. And then you're gonna bring your
I know we've actually got we've done tambourine workshops, and I've got more tambourines in my back room. I left one at them. We can do another.
Together in Yerushalayim.
Amen.
At the culmination
Amen.
of our history. Are you going to give us one last
Yes.
song? Like a Nima Amin or something?